Time for Type 40, your Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network, with me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks, and your designated driver up the M6 this time. Whether this is your first intergalactic road trip with us or you've been aboard before, you'll be happy to hear we're a freewheeling, non-gatekeeping, eccentric and eclectic show for everybody, whatever decade or century you started watching, reading or listening along to the ongoing adventures of our hero, Doctor Who. We talk about it all on this show. All views are encouraged, and there could even be a few amusements along the way. Time will tell. So come and step into our TARDIS and share this journey together here with us on Type 40. Yes, welcome to the show. Welcome back to Type 40. Not long ago, we were in Allendale and Longleat, and now we're just a junction or two away from another destination of dreams to all Doctor Who fans, with the smell of fish and chips already in the air. We're making an exhibition of ourselves yet again, aren't we, Simon Horton?
Indeed we are. I like what you did there, Dan. Very clever.
My first barbecue, my friend.
You don't just throw these things together, do you?
No. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, and I'm really looking forward to diving back into this. You know that I'm a huge fan of what we're talking about today. So yeah, this is nirvana for me. This is.
Yes, we're changing it up a gear with this show. And with these particular guests, it's been a whole year since we last spoke to these guys.
I can't believe it's been that long. I cannot believe it.
Well, firstly, I don't know where 2021's gone. And secondly, you know, the item we're going to talk about, having been with us for a full year too, we've lived with this particular reference work. Is that what you'd call it?
Yeah, I would, certainly. That's exactly what I'd call it.
Yeah. We've lived with this. It's become kind of indispensable. It's something that I flick through, albeit on my tablet. Even now, 12 months on, there are things that I think when it landed, you couldn't possibly take it in all at once. I found myself sort of furiously sort of going through these pages and going back and all the rest of it. It was very intense for us readers receiving it. So heaven knows how it was for them. How do we introduce them? I think that if we, looking back through the history of Doctor Who, if we accept that Bob Baker and Dave Martin, they were famously known as the Bristol Boys, weren't they? Then I think that designer and artist Alex Storer and writer-researcher John Collier, they have to be known as the Blackpool Boys, don't they? Welcome back to Type 40, boys. Good to see you again.
Hi there.
Good to see you too. Nice introduction, Dan. See what you did there?
Very good. Bowling them over with the introductions already. We've set the bar pretty high already. This project, guys, Blackpool Remembered. I can't believe it's been a year. But then again, I haven't actually done anything. John, how's the last 12 months been for you? How are you generally?
I'm not too bad, thank you. I'm busy doing the sort of stuff that I was up to 12 months ago, bizarrely. I never thought I'd be repeating the experience, to be fair. I blame Alex, to be honest. He's very good at cajoling and encouraging me because he knows how I'll react. So after the success of the first book, it was inevitable, wasn't it, that we might do a second?
Yeah, we knew there was going to be a book-shaped hole to fill.
So you are cajoler in chief then, Alex?
Yeah, cajoler, people wrangler, ideas person, sort of thing.
So is it your idea to do the second edition then, Alex? Did you push John to do this?
I don't think so, no.
They've got a little while to get their stories straight before we get into the depths of all this, because yes, unbelievably, they are at it again. We'll come to that in a little while. But for those of you out there who, particularly those not in the UK, let's backtrack a little bit and talk about Blackpool. So you may have heard the name Blackpool. You know it's a place somewhere in the UK. But for those people who still aren't sure what we're talking about, Simon, where exactly is Blackpool?
Blackpool is up on the west coast of northern England. It's sort of just north of Liverpool, 25 to 30 miles north of Liverpool, close to Manchester. It's in the county of Lancashire. For those people that like that kind of stuff, it's got about 140,000 residents, and to sort of Doctor Who fans, I think it's a bit of a paradise, really. There's a
Mecca.
Spiritual home. Yeah. I think Doctor Who's got a little bit of a spiritual home in Blackpool, not just because of the exhibition, the original exhibition, but because there was a later exhibition, because, of course, Tom Baker, Liz Sladen and Ian Marter famously went up there and turned on the lights. David Tennant also went and turned on the lights, because that's the other thing about Blackpool. As you can see, anybody that's watching the video, you can see from the photo that's on screen at the moment, Blackpool is famous for its autumn illuminations that come on around about September time. And the whole of Blackpool is lit up by millions and millions of light bulbs. And Doctor Who has always had a place, it was for many, many years, from sort of the mid-80s, has had a place within the illuminations, because there always used to be a large tableau of Doctor Who figures that if you Google or for Doctor Who Blackpool illuminations, you will find this fantastic tableau that they did through the late Tom Baker years, right the way through certainly through into Colin Baker. Did it ever hit Sylvester McCoy? Did he get represented at Blackpool? I don't think so. No. John's saying no. I think it ended. It certainly went as far as Colin Baker's reign, and I think it sort of ended then. But I think I'm right in thinking that Doctor Who still gets represented every year in the illuminations in some form, even if it is only with the odd illuminated Dalek kind of thing. So Doctor Who and Blackpool are kind of, they go together.
And Blackpool is known as the Las Vegas of the United Kingdom, isn't it?
Apparently so. I'm not quite certain why. Well, I guess because it's tacky, I suppose.
Sorry, listeners in Vegas. Sorry. And it's a historic town as well, is it? Because this is a legacy that stretches back 100 plus years, doesn't it? I mean, before the famous tower was even built, it was a tourist destination, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of those destinations starting sort of in the 20s that was the place to go if you're a socialite in the UK. That's where you used to go and have your holiday. And so historically, right the way up till today, it's just a massive, massive holiday destination. Except nowadays you get a few too many hen parties and stag do's for my taste. But hey, we're in the 21st century. What can you do?
Well, I don't go back very often, everybody, but whenever I do, or whenever I have over the last 20 years, it's never seemed really complete. It's always felt like there's something missing because there's not that destination to go to, the Doctor Who Blackpool exhibition, which closed in 1985, didn't it? And I think we talked about it as being a spiritual home earlier on. I think there's something ceremonial about the sort of the pilgrimage that fans take to go just back to the site where it was. We see photographs like that on social media, and they're tragic, but at the same time, they're quite comforting too. We're going to talk about some fond memories and some frustrations and creative processes this time here on Type 40 with the gentleman sat here in a moment. But before we get there, I'm going to remind you that if you'd like to do some real-time traveling of your own, each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is just a tap or two away on the device of your choice if you know where to look. And yes, there'll be a word about all of that later on, as well as making contact with the matrix of all knowledge that we call the Fandom Podcast Network for a word about all the other cult conversations across all those other shows over there. Okay, now that's all sorted. Let's get ready, everybody. Let's pump ourselves up to descend once again through the stairs to the virtual cellar and see what we discover amidst all the dry ice and the pulsing lights of the Blackpool Doctor Who exhibition. Revisited, everybody, revisited. Yeah, so last year, I got wind of a project which I thought was incredibly ambitious, even for Doctor Who fans. You know, how creative, how resourceful, and how nostalgic we all are as a breed. All of that seemed to culminate in this ebook, Blackpool Remembered. I think I first saw whispers of it over on Twitter with a Twitter account, and for several months I just kept one eye, and I wondered, is this really going to happen? Where's this really going to go? It was the early days of the pandemic, and there were lots of projects sort of bobbing up then, all creative, because that's what Doctor Who fans do. But of course, this was released a year ago this week, as of recording, and once it was released, I think it's brought forward, certainly in my case, a lot of memories that were dormant from me from my childhood. Not just about the times that I visited the site itself, but everything around it since, that mythology that we were talking about. You know, we spoke on that show, didn't we, on the podcast last year, John, at length about the whys, the whens, the hows. And then it happened, and it was received. Well, how was it received?
It just blew us away. I mean, the interesting thing was we released it at midnight, so I didn't get any sleep. I was on Twitter for about 2 hours afterwards, just trying to gauge the reaction and make sense of it all, because it had been something that I'd dreamt about since the late 80s, really, since the first time I'd gone back to Blackpool, realised the exhibition had shut because no one expected it to close in 85. And there'd been this exhibition-shaped hole that I wanted to fill. And so over the years, I collected loads of things, and I described that last time when I spoke to you. And then the reaction was just incredible. I mean, just, from the most amazing sources as well, from Clayton Hickman to you guys, so many different people on Twitter, just saying really, really, really wonderful things. And interestingly, like Clayton said, he's never even been to Blackpool, but actually, for him, it was like visiting it. For lots of us, it was about going back and revisiting it. Dan, you described that really well there about how you're saying it brought back some dormant memories even. I don't think a week goes by or hasn't gone by in the last 18 months when I've not had dreams about Blackpool, probably because I'm thinking about it all the time. But I know Alex is the same. We have these sort of email conversations about what I had another dream last night. It's always about the staircase. It's always about going back. So yeah, any opportunity to go back is always good.
And I think the thing for me is when I visited the original exhibition, I was 7 years old, so that's quite an impressionable age. And that whole experience still remains probably my most treasured childhood memory and experience, because it was at the height of my fandom at the time. So you literally were stepping into the Doctor's world, and it was incredible. But of course, over time, your memories fade. And I went twice in the same week, but they were very patchy memories. And as we were putting the book together, so many things started to just all of a sudden just reappear. And you think, oh God, yeah, you suddenly remember some obscure little detail that you haven't thought about for 30 odd years. And it just all makes sense. It all clicks back into place.
It's funny because that was one of the key things that I found so enjoyable about this first release of Blackpool Remembered, because I only went to Blackpool. My place of destination for the exhibition was definitely Longleat, but I did go to Blackpool maybe 2 or 3 times. But I'd forgotten an awful lot of it, and a lot of it had got mixed up in my head. And so this again, as you said, Alex, that's one of the great things about the book, was it kind of crystallized some of those floating memories that were out there that I hadn't quite anchored into a context. And that was what the book helped to do, was just sort of crystallize them back in my brain and solidify them and get them more as tangible memories that I could get hold of and remember properly, as opposed to these kind of spurious, floating, ambiguous memories that I didn't quite know where they fitted. And that was one of the things I just loved about the book. And what was great with the diagrams that you did, the floor plans, because that really helped anchor in my brain. Oh yeah, I remember now coming round that corner, and that's where that was, and that's where the Daleks sat, and that's where K9 was. So
reading the book, your brain sort of sort of reconstructs it almost three-dimensionally, Alex.
Yeah. Because I had misremembered things like the angle of the staircase. I think for years I thought it was at a slightly different angle to what it was at, and the way you went around the corridor. Because one of my own projects, as I think we discussed last time, was back in 2011, 2012, I was trying to make a floor plan of the exhibition. But back then there was just so little information online. It was all done from memory and a few tiny fan-drawn diagrams that I found online, including one of John's. But yeah, it just brought all these things back to the memory, and like you say, it cemented it and it corrected all the little misrememberings as well. And I think it's just really allowed you to literally to travel back in time. And because we did every year, whichever year was your year or years that you went, we've been able to recreate that. It took some work, it's. I think when you look back on the book, you think, "Good grief!" You know, it's huge. It was over 400 pages, and you think, "Well, we did this."
We're now a year on. You're coming up to 10,000 downloads of this ebook, this PDF. In the wake of its release, you know, this enormous body of work, John, and that hefty page count, the virtual page count. Once it was released, and people's memories, people started to get in touch, to tweet and to speak about their appreciation for what you'd managed to achieve. But that also came with it, didn't it? A further rush of more memories, of more details, of extra photos, and the book's actually been updated a couple of times, hasn't it, in between that initial release and now when we're speaking?
Yeah, when we let it go on the 28th of August last year, what we knew two things would happen. We knew we'd get an influx of, I didn't know this thing was coming out. I've got all these photographs and albums. I wish I'd known about it. I would have sent them to you. So that happened. And the second thing that happened was people commented on the floor plans. We knew the floor plans weren't exactly right. It was very difficult to pin down certain things. So there was always a flexibility, because it's an online publication, that we can go back, we can amend things, we can change things. We didn't want to add in too much new material, but it became apparent by about Christmas, 3 months later, that there were things out there that possibly make another book, a follow-up publication. So more content, which we really wanted to share with people, just as we've done the first time. And I guess that's where we're at now.
So yeah, you got to a point where you could only update that original book so many times. Is that what you're saying?
We didn't want to update it too much because we felt like we told the story quite well to that point. It was just with all the
factual corrections, really, wasn't it?
Yeah,
particularly on the floor plans, because as John said, we knew they were always going to be a work in progress. We had to get them out, and then it was down to the other fans that would spot the things that were either wrong or missing, that we then had the luxury to be able to just correct.
So you, is that what you managed between you? Did you sort of sift through that extra information?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of, as I'd done previously with the first book, I think I said in the last podcast, I just collected things. So when things were coming out again, and people were just sending me the odd one or two photographs, and then I got sort of a set of photographs sent to me. So all of these things were being squirreled away, just in case, there was going to be some kind of follow-up to it. But as Alex has just said, it was the factual corrections. We've got a friend now called Philip Brennan, who is really great at the detail. So he doesn't mind going through all of the stuff and checking all the hundreds of photographs just to make sure that we've got things in the right place on those floor plans. So they're pretty much accurate now, I'd say. I think that 99.9%, Alex.
As good as we can get them, without actually being able to physically go back and double check.
But do you think, is there still a possibility that people still might come forward and still say, no, you still got the Ice Warrior in the wrong place? Or are you...
of course, that's Who Fandom.
And we love our details to be correct. That's the big thing, isn't it, with Doctor Who fans?
It's the number of mandrels we're still trying to work out, and we don't think we'll ever get the right answer.
Well, they're tricky things, aren't they?
They are.
The best of times. Yeah. I mean, when you speak to the people who've received the book and they are just gushing with what it's meant to them, how it made them feel to load it up on their tablet, John, how does that make you feel?
Incredibly proud, to be honest. I mean, we've all talked there about the sort of dreams and the memories that it's evoked for people. I think there's something about Blackpool that is really emotionally linked to people's memories. There were lots of stories in the first book about people's family members, and quite sad stories in some cases about what they remember from Blackpool. So you can't sort of detach the emotion from the content, really. So as much as I'm passionate about it, Alex is passionate about it, we found an exhibition army that's out there who feel just the same way that we do. And so that emotional outpouring was quite touching when I started to get the messages, emails, comments on the website, things on Twitter. Yeah, I felt really proud and a real sense of achievement. And it became what it was always meant to be. It was a really successful community project with over 80 contributors who all sort of, allowed us to use their photographs, gave us their memories to share. And yeah, even now, Dan, it's quite interesting. I do occasionally flick through myself did I really do that? Was that really, did it really happen? And yeah, it's quite warming going back and having a look and flicking through and seeing everything that we actually were able to include.
Yeah, it was by the fans for fans. And like John says, we've all had that collective experience. I think when you're a kid, going to Blackpool perhaps in the 70s and 80s was like going to some sort of fantasy wonderland. So to have Doctor Who in the middle of all of that made it extra special. And they're the sort of memories you want to cling on to.
I think the thing is as well with sort of Doctor Who, I literally think there are really only three things actually from my childhood that you could do for Doctor Who. One was watch the programme, one was read the target books, and one was to go to the exhibitions. That was it. There were the odd toy. There was a toy. There was the occasional poster mag or whatever. But really, there were only three key areas of Doctor Who that you could explore. Later on, of course, there was the weekly and then the monthly. But that was much later for me. I was going to the exhibition in the mid-70s, long before the weekly was even thought of. So those three key things are always going to be hugely important to Doctor Who fans of a certain age. The show itself, the target books and the exhibition. And that's why I think, you were onto a winner choosing this, because people really, those exhibitions, the Blackpool and the Longleat exhibition really, really meant something to people. Far more, I think, than any of the sort of post-2005 exhibitions, because as impressive as they are, they're quite sort of sporadic. They're spread out. Sometimes it was in London, sometimes in Cardiff. So it started in Brighton. It's all over the shop. Whereas because the Longleat and the Blackpool exhibitions were so firmly cemented, literally cemented in the ground.
They did seem like they would be there forever, didn't they, Simon?
Yeah, and it really was a pilgrimage that each year you would want to go, in the way that I think with some of the latter exhibitions, you go once and it'd be really impressive, and then you kind of forget about it. Somehow Blackpool and Longleat got into your psyche and into your DNA and messed with you a bit in the best possible way, and stuck into the deepest corners of your brain. And I think that we've got to remember that with the exhibitions. They really were key to being a fan in the 70s and early 80s. Key.
Well, I'm looking at this quote you've got here from Clayton Hickman, guys. Clayton Hickman, who used to be the editor of Doctor Who magazine, and now is a successful designer and artist himself. Some beautiful colorizations of old black and white photographs, all those wonderful things that Clayton does. But he says here, do yourself a favor and grab this free PDF book right now. over 400 beautifully designed and photo-packed pages celebrating the old Blackpool Doctor Who exhibition. I've never so much as set foot in Blackpool, and I'm still absolutely loving it. Now, when I went to the Blackpool Doctor Who exhibition, there was this hint, guys, that I'd felt about it the same way that Simon did, that it was this pilgrimage that I had to wait and wait and wait to go on. And when I got there, I have to say, even though it was very evocative and it did stay with me, it sort of burnt into my memory, it didn't quite live up, because at that point in the mid-80s, I think it was starting to look a little unloved. And I'd seen photos in reference books and in Doctor Who Weekly of times where it was swamped with people. Its spectacular opening in 1974, wasn't it, that the exhibition opened? And these hordes of people, and there was something of the Beatlemania, I think, about it all when I saw all these pictures, and this feeling that I'd missed out on something amazing and something wonderful. And looking at what Clayton was just saying there, he missed out on it altogether. He was of the generation that maybe came along just that little bit too late. Is this something that you hear a lot as well? That for people who did miss it, it's the nearest, bestest thing to actually having gone, Alex?
I think we've achieved that through this book, yeah. Because a lot of those props that were there most of them went to Longley after it closed, but there were several props that were never seen again until, later years when the second exhibition opened. And even right now, I think, because that closed in 2009, I think it was, there's probably a generation of young fans that haven't even had a Doctor Who exhibition.
Scary thought.
And isn't that sad? It's just so sad because I can still remember when I first found out that there was a Doctor Who exhibition on, and it undoubtedly would have been one of the little trailers at the end of one of the episodes in the mid-70s. And that we were going to go. And I remember, in fact, on the right-hand side there, you can see the Wives of Henry VIII exhibition as well, which was running with it. I remember seeing the Henry VIII exhibition at the same time, the Wives of Henry VIII, with the costumes in. And I remember my parents sort of saying to me, when we were going, they sort of said, I think you'll probably be quite disappointed by this exhibition. And I was trying to get into my head, what was a Doctor Who exhibition going to have in it? I didn't know it was going to have costumes, props, a TARDIS. I had no concept at all that it would have any of that stuff. I remember my parents sort of saying, probably be quite depressing, it would be quite disappointing. It would probably just be, maybe a Dalek here and a Cyberman, and that'll be about it. So when I arrived and found what can only be described as, an absolute Pandora's box, an Aladdin's cave of Doctor Who wonderfulness. So you say you were disappointed, Dan. Boy, I was not disappointed. It was the most exciting thing to happen to me as a fan, bar watching the show itself. It was, my mind exploded with it, literally.
I think back in the 80s, it wasn't so much that I was disappointed as there was the feeling about where Doctor Who itself was at that time, that was looking a little bit unloved, and that it was something that the BBC were a little less proud of somehow. So the exhibition itself didn't let me down, but it was just maybe Blackpool itself as well was also starting to look a little bit unloved. But you know what I mean? There's that sort of FOMO that you fear that you've missed out on something. So when you're putting the book together, guys, and it was all very, very intense, and then it's released, and you get this outpouring of affection and appreciation, and all that you've done it. I mean, good God, you can't please all of the people all of the time, but Blackpool, remembered, must have come pretty bloody close. How did you then go and take a major sabbatical and not think about anything to do with Blackpool? Did you just go away, go read some other books or listen to some David Bowie, Alex? What did you do?
Yeah, I had space. I think it had been so intense. We started in April. The book was out in August, so a matter of months, really. Didn't really know Alex at all before the project started. That was the other thing. I mean, not only have we written two great books, or what I hope are two great books, but also we've got a great friendship now. And one day we're going to meet in Blackpool, which will be even more special, I guess. That'll be lovely. You're both invited, by the way, guys. Both invited. So yeah, I mean, just the reaction was just amazing. And just going back to what you were saying there about how you felt maybe a little bit disappointed, Dan. I think for me, I first went, 74, 75. Last visit was 84. I never went in the final year because that was my first holiday abroad. So didn't go to Blackpool. Been to Blackpool for every year of my life up to that point, It probably was a little bit more unloved by that stage. But there was always something new because the exhibition itself reflected the changing seasons of the program. There was always something new to see. I think what we're getting now is the sense that there's not an awful lot of these things left at all. Certainly the classic props, they've either gone into private ownership or maybe they're tucked away somewhere by the BBC. But I don't think we'll ever see a display like it ever again. Not really, with the amount of things that were put out at Blackpool and at Longleat. So it was always exciting going back to Blackpool every single year. I was lucky enough to go, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. I had family there who owned a B&B just around the corner as well. That helped. So as I say, even mid-season, and this goes back to the floor plans again, mid-season the exhibits would change. And often, they transferred things between Blackpool and Longleat. And that was another thing we were trying to track down when it came to finalising the floor plans.
That must have been a nightmare to try and plot.
It was. But the reaction again from younger people who are, maybe even in the 20s, they grew up with the likes of Eccleston and David Tennant. Really lovely comments saying, I feel like I understand a little bit of the history of the exhibitions, but also why people love it so much because it looks amazing. And the photographs, do that, don't they? They show it in its best light.
And another thing that I think we've achieved with these books, which we still need to remind ourselves of occasionally, is they are a first, really. Mm. I mean, last year around the time we were working on the Blackpool Remembered, the Telos book came out, but that was more like it was just a textbook with a few black and white plates in the back. Yeah, it was very, very factual. Whereas ours was more complementary to it in the fact that it was memories and nostalgia and packed with photos. So all of a sudden, in the same year, you've got 2 books on the exhibition. But think, actually, there hasn't been one before, ever. And it's only now that Doctor Who magazine have decided to actually run a couple of features on it.
And whilst there is power in words, what you guys managed to do, that balance. I mean, it was beautifully designed, Alex, I have to say, to lead the eye through.
John designed it.
Oh, you designed it?
The book.
I think I've got.
I mean, Alex,
who did what?
Alex he's a fantastic colleague to work with because he gives me all the feedback to alter things and change things. I'm not qualified as a sort of graphic artist. I've got a real interest in it. My degree was in art, but I've not really done anything in terms of my career. What Alex did obviously was provide some incredible original illustrations, and his artwork is absolutely stunning. We've got some more of that that we've put into the second book, but yeah, I
did the floor plans and wrote a couple of pieces, but the design of the book was John's.
But I could tell you the biggest secret, if you like. This could be a real exclusive for you guys.
Exclusives here on Type 40.
Well, everything that's been done with the first and the second book has all been done on PowerPoint.
What? On PowerPoint?
That is impressive. Yeah.
I don't even know how you've done that.
Here we are with our Adobe suites, and you've been working on it on PowerPoint.
I literally don't know how you've physically done that. That's very rude. Just a round of applause for that alone.
So 400 odd pages on the original title.
Yeah.
A little bit of time away.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the back of your mind, there's this awareness that a second book is coming conceptually to life. And we're here now, aren't we? We're back at Blackpool for Blackpool Revisited, as it's titled here, with another cover. That is definitely your artwork, isn't it, Alex?
It is.
And beautiful it is too.
So we've got the front cover, and we have a release date. So when is the second book being released, and what is the general conceit behind this one, John, that makes it different from the last one?
So we're not releasing it at midnight this time because I need to get my sleep. So we're releasing it Saturday the 28th of August, just as we did last year. 28th of August. We chose that August bank holiday was always a time when I'd be certainly in Blackpool, and we're releasing it at 10 a.m. the traditional time that the exhibition would open in the morning. And then we're going to spend the day hopefully just sitting back and watching the comments come in. We're just hoping it's going to be as positively received as the last one. But the premise behind it is we obviously wanted to include all that stuff we were talking about earlier, that old content which was new to us that people hadn't been able to send to us to include in the first book. So there's a few pages on that. I wouldn't say we've gone overboard on it. We've gone a bit broader this time and a bit deeper in places. So although we cover some of the original exhibition and things associated with it, such as another BBC exhibition that took place in 1978 that was around the corner. We've got things about the sort of bootleg merchandise you could buy in Blackpool in the 1970s and 1980s. There's an article on that. We've also gone a little bit beyond Blackpool. So lots of things linked to exhibitions, but also lots of things linked to the program itself. I mean, for example, in the second season, 1975, Jonathan Sellers had his miniature Doctor Who models put on display in Blackpool. They'd been seen on Blue Peter. Jonathan was one of those people who got in touch and said, I read the book. My miniature models were in the exhibition in 1975. There's no way we could have gone out and found Jonathan, but he found us, which is amazing. So he's been able to tell his story. We've got a whole section on David Boyle, a little bit about his work with Dapol and also the Llangollen experience. But really, we've done a big tribute to David alongside his partner, Julie Whitfield. And we've put together a whole sort of walkthrough section of the second exhibition. So if you never got to Blackpool for the second exhibition, David Boyle's Doctor Who Museum, hopefully you can do it through the pages of our next book, because that is quite a weighty section. So there's 10 sections altogether. Alex has been off and he's been exploring things like the toys that are associated with the program. He's been talking to artists and illustrators associated with the program. Do you want to mention those, Alex?
Yeah, we've because we've got a section in the book that looks at the marketing of the exhibition, things like the poster design, which artist Ronald Binney has helped us with, and he's done some great artwork for the book as well, exploring Frank Bellamy's work, as you can see there, and looking at how the sort of visual styling of the museum changed over time. On the back of that, I thought it would be an interesting idea to try and track down some of the other artists whose work you would have seen at the exhibition, whether it was on posters or in what you could buy in the shop. So I've interviewed with Andrew Skilleton, who needs no introduction.
Fantastic.
And is my personal favourite Doctor Who artist. And he did the poster for the final season of the exhibition. But of course, if you went into the shop, then you would have seen the Who Dares prints and posters and the 1986 calendar and bookmarks and all the rest of it. So I've talked to him about his work, both wider than Who and also focusing in on the Blackpool stuff. Another favourite of mine was when I went, I bought the target poster of the exploded Dalek diagram where you see all the innards, and I've always loved that poster.
Like a cross-section thing.
Yeah. Like the one that was in the old technical manual, except this was all in wonderful, vibrant colour.
Yeah, remember it well.
After some research and work online, I finally managed to track down the artist who did it, Graham Potts.
Wow, that's a first. That is definitely a first.
So I think if you got the Telos Target book, you'll see a few references to Graham in there, because he did, I think, there's a Celestial Toymaker cover and one or two others. I wanted to talk to him about poster art and, of course, his other covers, like the cover art to Peter Haining's Celebration book, which was one of his.
I didn't know that was his either. That's a beautiful piece of artwork.
And the other artist is, and this was a really nice surprise, another thing I bought there was the Dalek T-shirt. They had Peter Davison, Cyberman and Dalek T-shirts, and of course I came away with a Dalek one, a few scraps of which just remain pressed into a book these days. But I always love the drawing on it. And looking at it again recently, I saw the artist's name, Rod Vass. I thought, okay, let's look up this Rod Vass guy. Found him, and it turned out he was one half of Imagineering Limited, who used to build the props for the series, as well as making things for exhibitions, and they had a whole range of latex masks. So me thinking I was going to be finding a jobbing artist who'd done this one Dalek T-shirt turned out to be somebody that had had this big involvement in the show. They built Daleks, and so he gave us an interview, and so it was really been really interesting, really fascinating. And as an artist myself, a real privilege to be able to speak with them.
So what they're kind of talking about are the kind of extraneous things, the things, maybe not even the things that we save over time, like badges and like pens and whatever else that we may buy. They're the things like the little handout postage, Simon, that sometimes as children you might see them in a window or whatever else. You might even have one, but your mum throws it out, thinks nobody wants it anymore.
Well, again, I mean, the other thing to bear in mind, I was saying earlier on about this was one of the three key aspects of Doctor Who that you as a child could engage with in Doctor Who. And what you've got to remember, of course, is that the shop at Longleat and Blackpool was the only place in the entire UK that you could buy some of this stuff, such as the badge that I've got on, that like Alex has got on, the T-shirt that John's wearing, the badge that Dan's got. And the poster magazine, the two Tom Baker poster magazines, there was literally only two places in the entire country that you could get this stuff.
No news agents, no gift shops. There was no Toys R Us there.
Nothing.
There weren't even really mail order places, were there? It was
not
you
at
could
that
only
point.
Get them at the exhibition.
Not at that point. John Fitton came along much later. And started doing
mid-80s.
But yeah, absolutely, the mid-80s. But in the mid-70s, when John, you and I were going to the exhibitions, that was it. And so again, it was part of the experience was to go and buy the stuff. And I can still remember my first visit to Blackpool, actually, and I bought, loads of stuff. And I remember the lovely little old lady behind the counter or whatever, and she said, "Are you sure you can afford all this stuff, dear? It's very expensive. Are you sure you want it?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do want it.
I've been saving my pocket money all year."
Take it. Just take it all. Take all my money. Give me anything I can afford. So Alex, for you to track down some of those people that have been involved in that, in either the merchandise or the promotion, for me, and again, because I come from sort of a graphic art background, that's hugely interesting to me. I'm blown away to find that you've sort of tracked some of those people down. And so you're right, John, the breadth of this book, which, to be honest, to begin with, I was assuming it was just kind of, don't take this the wrong way, but it was more of the same kind of thing. It was sort of a second edition of the first one, as it were. And it's not. This is an entirely new work that's basically expanding the whole Blackpool horizon. And I can't wait to get this. I'm equally as excited by this as I am about the first one, because of what you guys have just said is in there. I can't wait to see this one. It sounds
more
cracking.
of the same but different.
Yeah,
and I think that's it. We did go off on a few tangents, but as we say in the strapline on that graphic there, everything leads us back to Blackpool in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when I look at the content that you've researched and pulled together for this second book, something that really strikes me, and about what you've just said about everything goes back to Blackpool, I think what's probably a timely decision and something that younger people will relate to and maybe rush to will be how you have considered the later exhibition as well from the 2000s, because as time goes on now, and as people who were children when that exhibition was in place, as they reach adulthood and are becoming more active in our community and getting to the kind of age where they reflect on their childhood, I'm hearing a lot more about that. And even though David Boyle, the curator, the man who made that possible, he sadly passed away a couple of years ago. The fact that you have poured that affection over his accomplishments too, the childhoods that he, in his own way, brought a similar kind of colour to. I think that's incredibly generous. And I can't wait to see what you've managed to bring from the later exhibition. And if you say his partner's been involved with it too, I just think it's a really sensitive thing to do, and something that will absolutely bring the story fully up to date and show where the echoes and the ripples of the original exhibition have continued to be felt right up to the, getting kind of meta really with the publication of your book last year.
Well, it's quite interesting because David Boyle's museum opened pretty much exactly 30 years after the original exhibition in Blackpool. So April 2004. And at that point, I'd got a 5-year-old son. So the first thing I was thinking was, I was that age when I went to a Blackpool Doctor exhibition. I've got to do that, again in my life, have that experience again. And there are some pictures of Elliot in the book. He's given me his permission. He's 22 now. Given me his permission to use the cheesy snaps. But you're right. I mean, there's a whole generation now who did get to experience that from 2004 to 2009. That second exhibition/museum that was there. It was a bit easier to put together in terms of those years because what we knew was things didn't really move around too much. There were a couple of exhibit pieces that were shifted about, and from about 2005-06. Some of the new series items were also on display at Blackpool as well. So what you had was all the classic stuff, and then what began to seep in was some of the really brand new costumes and characters that those young children would have been watching right there and then. So it's very similar to experience, to what
same thing in spirit.
Yeah.
Plus, it was much more photographed because people had phones and digital cameras by then.
Oh, I see.
So, photos have been much more plentiful than of the original exhibition. Even when you've got elusive props like the Ice Warrior or the Sontaran from the Two Doctors that only briefly appeared there, perhaps in the first year, we've got the photos of it.
We all love a photo, don't we? I think every time I come across a Dalek or TARDIS out in the wild, and it may be wildly misproportioned, Simon. There was one in the Custard Factory a couple of years ago, down by the Mockingbird, the small cinema that's in the middle of the Custard Factory in Digbeth in Birmingham. It looked really nothing like the TARDIS. It was all over the place. But, there I was, the person I was with at the time, said, come on, just take us a snap, will you? I couldn't help myself. And, Alex, you've supplied us some photographs as well, haven't you, from your childhood and more recent pictures of you in various locations of throughout time and space, treasured memories. So, thanks for sharing those with us, because it's obviously, these must have been very intoxicating days for you.
Oh, absolutely. That picture there evokes a lot of memories. I regret not touching the Dalek because it had a sign on it saying, "Do not touch." Of course, I should have rebelled and given it a prod. But just to be standing next to a real one, the prop from the series, as that one was, it was just, and that was before I'd even been inside the place,
So going inside the place was a bombardment of the senses, I think.
Yeah, it was. It was an assault on the senses in the best possible way, and that's what I'm talking about when I say that the Cardiff exhibitions and the London exhibitions and the Brighton exhibitions have never quite matched up to that.
The props have looked better and perhaps look more impressive, but the way it's been lit has been soulless, and I don't know. Everything's just not quite the same.
I think I agree, Alex. The perfect word there is soulless, and that's not to take anything away from them, because I've been to all the modern exhibitions and they're great. And as you say, it's very impressive to see Broton or the K1 robot in beautiful, crisp white light. But the Doctor Who exhibitions of Blackpool and Longley were very much more. The whole was far more than the sum of the parts, and it wasn't just that you've got the props and the costumes there. It was the lighting. It was the sound montage. It was the dark, narrow corridors. It was the smell. It's ridiculous. It sounds like still smell it.
Distinctive aroma of warm latex and perspex
and wood fiberglass. And wood. You know, the cabinets were all made of wood, and as you say, perspex. So it was a heady brew. Literally, those old exhibitions was a heady brew. And I remember, and one of the things, of course, was standing there as we're looking at a pterodactyl now, and I would stand there for ages in front of any exhibit, just waiting for the lighting to change. So you saw the particular prop or costume in all the different lighting states, because it would change, and you'd stand there waiting for the music to change, and so that you heard all the little nuances of the music. So there was something that the exhibitions were intoxicating. They were literally, we're not overselling this when we say it was a bit like a drug. It was intoxicating in the way that modern exhibitions are much more clinical, much more clean and precise, and on the one hand, you're much closer. You were in the recent exhibitions such as Cardiff and London. You were much closer to the exhibits, but in many ways, you were much further removed from them, because it was nowhere. It wasn't such a visceral, tactile to the brain experience. It did stuff to you, seeing those exhibits there.
But even in David Boyle's museum, he did his best to recreate that atmosphere, that sort of lighting.
He did.
And even then, a lot of even though they were quite worn, a lot of the props and costumes still look better than they had done on TV because of the way they were lit. And I think one of the things we noticed when we were putting Blackpool Revisited together was in the section on the new museum was a lot of the photographs where people had used flash just didn't look as good, because all the ambient lighting, the colour was gone, and you saw the tatty prop for what it was, whereas a non-flash photograph with a red, green or blue lights looked really evocative and atmospheric, and just how you'd want to see it.
The magic of being staged. Well, we had Neil Cole back on the show a few weeks ago, and he was speaking similarly about his own exhibition up the Museum of Classic Sci-Fi, and how, obviously, because he's done certain amounts of restoration on the various items there, and how when the perspex goes in and the lights go down, even he forgets what these things were made of, and he's swept away back to his own childhood and the magic of it all. So with the two books together, guys, well, what's the page count of Blackpool Revisited? How many pages does this bring it up to altogether on Blackpool?
Go on, John.
Put together.
Blackpool Revisited is 630. So it's over 1,000 with both.
630 pages.
About Blackpool. Sorry, Simon, I'm blowing your
Ladies and gentlemen, we get to see Simon Horton's head explode live on air.
That's phenomenal. How can you do that's brilliant. Hats off to you guys. 600 odd pages. Brilliant.
And I think that's one of the really, really positive things about being able to produce a digital publication is we're not bound by production or costs or restrictions. So if it wants to be that big, it can be.
Yeah.
And
are people still surprised that it's free, guys?
Oh God, they're astounded. Yeah.
I'm still surprised. You should. I mean, literally, you should be charging for this, guys. It's brilliant stuff. This is a lot of hard work gone into this.
Don't give them any ideas. It really is incredible. The idea that you've now doubled and then some the page count for the entire work, the entire effort. It really is. It says a lot for your creativity, for your innovation, your dedication, and more of that affection for this very special time, this very special place, guys. I'm slightly blown away by this.
I'm completely blown away by it, and all credit to you, the fact that you are putting it out there for free. Absolute all credit.
Seriously, it's a great service.
It's brilliant.
as we said earlier, people give freely of their own time and their own stories and their own objects, photographs, etc. So I love the fact that it's this community. We've got, again, nearly another 90 contributors. Some are the same, some are different. And we've been able to sort of go off on tangents, which are still linked to Blackpool because of the stories that we've, had brought to us. I mean, we've covered things like the International Garden Festival at Liverpool in 1984, which was just down the road from Blackpool. So there's a few pages on that. In the first book, there was just one photograph. So we've gone a little bit deeper with that. We got a really nice submission about the current Doctor Who experience that's housed inside Madame Tussauds in Blackpool. So Jodie Whittaker figure and some of the costumes from her tenure. We had some a nice article written about that. So we decided we'd backtrack a bit and we'd cover Madame Tussauds in London in 1980, which is, okay, we've gone away from Blackpool, but there's a link there. And we've done a really nice history of the illuminations as well. So we've gone back from the moment where the lights were switched on by, as we were saying earlier, Simon, Tom, Liz and Ian, and we've kind of traced it through. And the latest photographs were taken last month. So we've got a whole history of Doctor Who at the Blackpool Illuminations. So we just have fun kind of going off at these different tangents, but always saying to each other, is it still Blackpool? Is it still Blackpool?
Because even writing a piece about the Sevens stuff and the Dapple stuff, as I have done.
Yeah.
The Sevens models were on sale in the shop, so you could have bought one when you were there. And Dapple obviously links back to David Boyle, so it all connects. But I think one really lovely thing that happened during this one was a fan called Phil Singleton that got in touch, who not only provided a fantastic story because he kept his diaries with dates and everything from his visits to Blackpool. So we've got a plethora of really nice photographs to go with his writing. But it turned out on two different items. Our colleague Philip Brennan, that John mentioned earlier, had taken a photograph of Colin Baker at the Bolton show in 1985.
Yeah.
And I was talking with the other Phil, who said, "Oh, I was there too," and took almost the same photograph. And just this week, other Philip has looked at his pictures and found Phil in his photograph. The real thing for me was one of my other 1985 was a pivotal year for me as a Doctor Who fan as a kid, because I went to the Blackpool exhibition and I met Colin Baker when he opened Texas Home Care in Sheffield. Mm-hmm. And I've always, because again that's a bit of an old memory, I was trying to work out just when, because I can't quite remember when in the year we went to Blackpool. It's bound to have been in the summer holidays or perhaps spring bank. So I was trying to establish from a chronological point of view. So I knew I met Colin after Blackpool when that was. And I found reference to him opening other Texas stores around the country in the autumn of 1985. And I think it was on the Facebook exhibitions group. Phil said, "Oh, yeah, I was a student in Sheffield in October." And it was around that sort of time. And it turned out he'd got photographs. For years, I've been looking to see if there was any photos of Colin opening Texas and not found any reference to it. And then all of a sudden, I'm sent an email containing 10 or 12 photographs of Colin in Sheffield, where I was as a 7-year-old about to meet him. So that was probably the most amazing thing on a personal level. So we've written a piece on that in there as well. So we've gone off at tangents, but they're all connected.
One of the tangents that I can't wait to read. I can't wait to read about. I just noticed on the graphic there is the stuff about the Edwin Hall Dalek riots, which again, obviously, those for me are absolutely synonymous with Blackpool. Anybody that was going to Blackpool in the sort of 70s, 80s, those Dalek riots. In fact, I can still remember in the late 80s, I did get a kind of an obsession with those rides, and I went as far as trying to track one down. I remember phoning in the late 80s. I remember phoning.
I can imagine you doing that.
And again, you've got to bear in mind this is obviously long before the internet, so I can't even remember how I got the telephone number for Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Don't ask me. But somehow I got the number.
Just the one
Blackpool.
phone there ringing away.
I somehow must have got the front desk of Blackpool Pleasure Beach and said, look, bear with me. I'm trying to track down. I'm trying to see if I can get hold of a Dalek ride. And well, you can imagine the silence at the other end of the line with this nutter. And they're like, do you know how big Blackpool Pleasure Beach is? Where did you see this Dalek ride? And I never managed to track it down, but I was that obsessed with them. I really, I knew they'd got them there, but never got them. So I can't wait to read about the Dalek rides, because they were every time I went to Blackpool, I always had to do the Dalek ride every time.
There's a picture of me in one of those rides in the book, although I think it was taken in Mablethorpe or Cleethorpes or somewhere like that, maybe 83, 84, that kind of time period.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and that, to be honest, that article came about because Alex had a photograph, several other people had photographs. We've got one, it must be early to mid 80s on Central Pier, so there was definitely one on Central Pier. And there was one in the amusements, which was just around the corner from the original exhibition. We've got some photographs of the one that's in there. And so they were dotted about. There was various ones in Blackpool. I tracked down a guy who's got his own website all about Edwin Hall Daleks, and he provided us with a load of photographs of one that he's restoring. So you get to see the sort of inner workings of that. And there's some advertising material as well, because they were special. But what I didn't realise, and this goes back to Phil Singleton, actually. Phil sent us a photograph of himself. He's about 16. And he's crammed inside a police box ride, which was in one of the amusements at Blackpool. So there was like a sort of mini TARDIS ride as well, which I'd never seen before. So
no, me neither.
Put that in the book.
Now you said that, I do remember that. I'd completely forgotten about. But yeah, I remember that.
One memory unlocks another, and another. And before you know it, you're back there being hit with all these dormant memories. The ride's not over yet, but it is time that we took a break, just a couple of minutes, to illuminate you about all those other fantastic shows and conversations going on across the Fandom Podcast Network, covering all those other wonderful, fantastical franchises and genres. So here's our friend Kevin with the whats and the wheres about all of that. And you can meet John, Alex, Simon, and myself back here for more Blackpool Doctor Who exhibition talk in a couple of minutes.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Yes, we've teased and tantalised you there, and we can even clothe you too. There's merch to match all of those shows, including Type 40. If you head over to teepublic.com, search for the Fandom Podcast Network, and you'll find a store full of all the team colours for all of the shows on everything from T-shirts to phone cases and even tapestries. Seeing is believing. Treat yourself, treat your other selves, and it all goes to support the Fandom Podcast Network into the bargain. So everybody wins, everybody. Yes, we're back. We're back with Alex, with John and Simon to talk about the new Blackpool Revisited ebook, the PDF landing very, very soon as a free download. 600 pages worth of extra Blackpool content. Good God. It's a wonder it doesn't come with a stick of rock as well. So yes, after all this intense work, John, surely now it must be time for a holiday.
Yeah, definitely. I need to go back to Blackpool, don't I? But the one thing, seriously, which we've not been able to do, and we've kind of run out of time, really, because of everything that's going on and restrictions on travel and that kind of thing, is I really wanted to go back to Chapel Street to ask the people who now own the shoe seller shop and the basement area if I can just go down once more that staircase, take some photographs. I know it's going to look completely different, and maybe even walk up back onto Bonnie Street through the exit staircase. That's the sort of one thing I've not been able to do in time for this book. Whether that's a spin-off or the third publication, who knows? But a holiday is very much on the cards.
That really would be bringing the project full circle, wouldn't it?
It would, and I've done a sort of, again, a plotted history of the site and what happened after 85. So there are some nice pictures, and we've done some collages of then and now shots, so you can see how things have changed since it closed. But I know I'll be deeply disappointed because there's nothing down there. Well, the last time I went down there was in the early 90s. It was full of shoes, but I'd still like to do it again and try and get a sense of that aroma. See if I can smell any old bits of rotting latex and spot certain things. I mean, the hexagon shapes are still over the staircase, so I know they're still there. So there must be. Yeah. So I mean, that's just been painted over, So,
and I think the banister is still the same as well.
All original, yeah. The sort of the covering of the stairs is the same as well. So, yeah. Although there's no Doctor Who related bits and bobs, there are some vintage bits of the building that are still the same. So that's kind of nice.
Echoes of your former self.
That's the thing.
I think that could be some extra video content when you finally get there to film the whole thing.
Yeah, we could stick it on Twitter, put it on Instagram, but at some point I'm going to have to just beg them to let me down those steps.
But it is, you might find in a way that it's quite heartbreaking. I remember going to Longleat for the first time a few years ago and seeing, and ironically, the TARDIS is still at Longleat. The TARDIS entrance is still at Longleat, just painted white and sort of just kind of built over with all fiberglass junk. But it's still just about discernible there, and it's heartbreaking. Your heart just sinks when you see it, because it's almost that tangibility of seeing it gone, that it's no longer there and it's not what it was. But the fact that the hexagons are still above the door at Blackpool, it's almost painful. Do you know what I mean? It's just that reminder. It's gone. It was brilliant. It was just one of the best places in the universe for a Doctor Who fan, and it's gone. It is heartbreaking.
So
me and John spent an entire afternoon one day talking about the pavement. I mean, only in Doctor Who circles can you find yourself doing that.
Well,
we're so like-minded, isn't it, really? It's a good job we're so like-minded.
Have you, Alex, we've just heard John talk about something that's in his bucket list, but have you got anything that you're still, some itches that you want to scratch creatively or personally with the whole Blackpool Doctor Who thing?
As far as Blackpool goes, I don't think so. I think we've covered everything now. I think all the vague or woolly memories have come clear. I've managed to relive my year through all the photographs that came in, through all the memories, through designing the floor plans. Because he actually, daft as it sounds, actually illustrating those floor plans was virtually walking yourself through it numerous times as we edited it. So there is a sense of having traveled back in time and revisited it and seen a lot of the things that 7-year-old me saw. And for example, when I went to the David Boyle Museum in 2008, it never occurred to me to try and track down the old site, which was literally just a few yards around the corner. And I know I would have been disappointed if I had done. So I kind of, part of me thought, well, I should have gone to have a look. But then another part of me thinks, well, no, it's better off remembered as you remember it.
I had a similar experience. I went looking for it and I couldn't find it. I couldn't quite place it together because it had been, I think by that point, it had been the best part of 15 years in between my visits to Blackpool. So all my memories about the markers of where it was, where it may be. And it was certainly before the internet. So I had no resources to go back to, just really hazy memories and a couple of black and white photographs from the place being opened, funnily enough. You know, those often repeated images that we see in the weekly, that we see in Peter Haining's books, all those things. And yeah, and by the end of it, I did come to a similar conclusion, Alex. Because now we see it here on a page, on a Kindle or an iPad or whatever else. And I think with the sheen that you guys have given it, the creative flourishes, and the words too. You know, it's. I think it looks as good as it ever could, short of rebuilding it brick by brick. And as nutty as Doctor Who fans are, I think nobody could possibly do that, could they? Could they? even in cyberspace, Simon. But put on the virtual helmet, virtual Blackpool.
I think there will come a point at some point in cyberspace where somebody builds one. Yeah, I don't doubt that. But I mean, one thing that struck me with the first Blackpool book, but strikes me even more so with this new one, is that this kind of Dan, you talked at the beginning of this about it being is it a reference work? Well, yeah, it absolutely is a reference work, and the breadth of research that you guys have done. This isn't just a fanzine about the Blackpool exhibition. It's far more than that, and this is definitely up there with kind of the likes of Warp, which cover the weekly and the monthly, and then the other one that I love, which is Nothing at the End of the Lane, which covers kind of the TV show, the minutiae of the TV show. And this is up there. This is the one that covers Blackpool. You know, you guys have created undoubtedly the most definitive work on the Blackpool exhibition that exists at this precise moment in time. Maybe somebody will be crazy enough to come along at some point in the future and do something more. I can't see how. By the looks of it, you guys have got pretty much everything covered. So this is probably going to stand up as the definitive final word on the Blackpool exhibitions. Has that kind of occurred to you guys, that you've done something really quite seminal and key? This is a key text for Doctor Who fans, isn't it?
I think it is unique. And when we were making the first book, it occurred to me, I thought, we're doing something that hasn't been done before.
But not only that, as I say, it's more than that. It hasn't been done before. You've done it so well now that, as I say, it kind of feels like it must be the last word on the Blackpool exhibition, and it's going to be the go-to guide on the exhibition. I would imagine it's going to become this key reference that everybody thinks of. And of course, what's great about it is that it looks so, as Dan has talked about, it looks so great as well. It's visually, unlike the Telos book, as you mentioned, Alex, which is it's a great book, but it's just a very dry run on the exhibitions. This Blackpool Revisited would be, if you could afford to have it printed, would be a coffee table book. It's that kind of book, isn't it, to dip in and out of and to look at.
A boutique publication.
Well, yeah, and the photos, and the way you've laid it out. That's the first version I'm talking about here. The original book, the way it's laid out, it's so visually appealing. The artwork is Alex, your artwork is great. The design is brilliant. So it's a visual treat as much as a textual treat. And so not only is, as I say, it's the definitive work on Blackpool, I would imagine, but it's just so visually interesting and evocative as well. Because you talked about this in the first podcast, you guys, where you tried again to sort of recreate. I know, Alex, you talked about trying to recreate that sort of lurid colour lighting in the artwork, and that's so important. You were right to do that, because that is part and parcel of Blackpool.
Yeah, and I think we looked back at all the various books, annuals or illustration styles that influenced us or that we admired over the years, and sort of repurposed that and channeled it into the look of the books.
Yeah,
it needed a Blackpool look and feel.
Yeah, and there were, two standout publications for me. It's Time Frame, which I think is just wonderful. It's a tiny little picture of the Blackpool exhibition in Time Frame, and that sort of sparked something when that was first published. Wouldn't it be lovely to have a book that's dedicated just to the exhibition? And The Vault, which I think is another one where you've got that sort of, both of them have got that sort of scrapbook feel about them. It's almost like they're very personal. It's a very personal view and a very personal collection of things.
A miscellany almost, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives you that feeling. It just gives you that emotive kind of connection to it. We're still looking for Alison Cross, though, and I'm never going to give up this search for Alison Cross, who worked at the shop. She served me so many times. She's not that much older than me, so she's still knocking around somewhere, but we've done our absolute damnedest, haven't we, Alex, to find Alison Cross.
If anybody out there listening or watching, interacting in any way, knows where Alison Cross is, get in touch with the Blackpool Boys, or get in touch with Type 40. Leave us a comment or send us an email, or reach out to us at Type 40 Doctor Who at Twitter or on Instagram. And yeah, these guys would love to meet you, love to talk to you, and get you involved in some harebrained project or another, no doubt.
Second edition.
Heaven knows how many pages you could get out of Alison. Please come forward. That'd be fantastic. Yes. So where are we? Yeah, Blackpool Remembered is still available to download for free on the website. The links will be in the description of the podcast and of the video too, so you can hit them right away and get your first fix of Blackpool goodness. And Blackpool Revisited is published on Saturday, the 28th of August, on the anniversary of that original book being released as a free PDF download. What time was it again, John? 10 a.m. in the morning?
10 a.m. Opening time of the exhibition.
There you go. That's easy to remember. And yes, it's. I don't know whether the server will be able to cope with the demand. Are you anticipating a surge?
Well, we certainly had a bit of a one last time, didn't we, Alex?
Yeah, I think we'll have all those readers and a bit more this time.
Yeah, definitely.
I definitely remember comments flying around at the time of that first book coming out, and people suddenly. I heard about it late. I must be honest. I only heard about it when we first started talking about doing the podcast, and so people suddenly only found it. So, I know a lot of people, I think, only found it when it actually was released and it started the word get out. And I remember people, various comments on Facebook. Oh, this looks great. How much is it? And it's free. And people, what? It's free? And, they couldn't believe it. It was generating a heck of a lot of excitement. The only downside, of course, of all of this is it'd be fantastic to have a printed version. And I guess it's never going to happen, because it's just, as you say, at how many pages, it's just always going to be far, far too cost prohibitive. It ain't going to happen, is it?
No, yeah, we even priced it up out of morbid curiosity, and the production costs were to do it properly were astronomical, and then it would obviously be a very, very expensive thing to buy as well. And then you've got the whole worms of rights and copyright and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't John's vision to do it that way. as much as we like tangible physical things, digital was the best place for this because they can be expanded, they can be revised and added to.
Well, and as you said earlier, Alex, you would have had to compromise the project to do it, because you just couldn't have put 400 pages in the original and 600 in this one. You couldn't have done it. So this seems to be the perfect solution.
So what's the name? What's the title of the website? What's the destination that people can download this from as from Saturday, 28th of August then, Alex?
You always pick me for this, don't you, Dan?
John!
Well, you can either Google Blackpool Remembered.
Yeah.
You'll need to search for Remembered rather than Revisited to get both books. You can follow us on Twitter, and our Twitter handle is @Blackpool7485. We're also on Instagram. You just search for Blackpool Remembered, you'll find us. The hashtag there will definitely get you to our page. And all of those social media outlets have got links to the actual download. I don't do Facebook, but I know Alex spreads the word on Facebook, so I'm sure it's on there too.
And you've got your beautiful art prints as well, haven't you, Alex? People can actually buy these. Each are individually numbered packs with these 6 illustrations, aren't they? A5 prints of these really vibrant illustrations that you put together for the book.
Yeah, some of them were for the book, and that led me on to doing other pieces. It was a very limited edition run, so supplies are getting lower.
And I've got my set of these, and I still love them because they just remind me so much of the exhibition. Because again, it's back to that lurid lighting. Great pieces of art, Alex. Love them.
And we'll be sure to put all the links, all the details for that in the description and in the show notes of the podcast too for everybody out there. Yes, that does cover it. We've just got to play the waiting game now and wait for the book to arrive. We've reached the end of our amble around those pulsing lights, the perspex, and the polystyrene at the Blackpool exhibition yet again. Say R, everybody. Say R.
Oh.
Hey, it's nearly Panto season. You're in Blackpool. And that's the old girl starting up and calling time on another trip in our TARDIS. I'll be back with another Type 40 soon. Look out for that. Wherever you found this, it could have been at the home of Type 40. Our very own podcast feed, type40.podbean.com, due to popular demand, but we're also still on Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, iHeart Radio, Stitcher, almost every podcatcher you can name. Don't think there's any that we're not on now. And if you want to get in touch with the Fandom Podcast Network too, we are still on their incredible master feed with all those other shows. And we're also on YouTube, the world's largest streaming platform, on the Spacebooks YouTube channel. Maybe you'd like to have your say. You can reach out to us, all of us at Type 40, through our social medias, Instagram and Twitter, at Type40 Doctor Who, or email us, type40doctorwho@gmail.com. And if you're feeling really, really brave and fancy a trip of your own, you can head over to Facebook and put Type 40 into the search field there, and you'll find the Type 40 Facebook group full of fans of all generations, people who were there for Blackpool and people who've come along since. They're sharing, talking, geeking out, and arguing now and again about all aspects of the Whoniverse. Don't miss that. Simon, where can people connect with you over on Facebook?
They can come and share happy memories of Blackpool over with me on Facebook, where if you look for the Whonatics, you will find me there as one of the admins.
There you go. And you can find me scattered throughout all of space and time, but mostly on Twitter and Instagram as the Spacebook, where I'm wheezing, groaning, and beeping and whizzing about all things geeky. Oh, that sounds wrong. About all things geeky inside and outside of the TARDIS. Thanks, John. Thanks, Alex, for coming back. It's been brilliant catching up with you again and hearing about this yet another incredible project, audacious project that I can't wait to get swiping on and to take it all in. I
want to know what happens next. What are they going to do next?
Another lost weekend. I was going to say, yeah, but thank you. Thanks again, everybody. And thanks to you for being here. We always have the time, if you have the space, here on Type 40. Take care. Speak soon. Bye-bye.